Good morning. So we've the election coming up in a couple of days, and while there's so many issues involved in politics, and they make it sound like it's very difficult and intricate and complex, so complex to the point where the average person, myself and yourself, are just incapable of making any sort of sense of it. We cannot untangle the Christmas lights, right? So we need these people who are better than us to go in there, more educated, more savvy, more wise, right, more knowledgeable. We need them, or so the message is, that we need them to go in and make decisions, not for us in terms of make the decisions we would like to be made, but on behalf of us, right? So you can look at, and you see it a lot, the polls. What are the topics of concern? What are the deciding conversations, the conversations that will decide who votes for who, right? And you can see loads of things like, so the economy, the cost of living crisis, right? Which is inflation, which is due to the amount of money that the government borrows, right? The more money they borrow, the less money in your pocket is worth, the less value on the money in your pocket, right? So things start costing more. So even though you're making the same money, you're worse off because government are borrowing millions and billions, right, to try and buy your vote, right? But they don't explain that to you, right? They just say that these things just kind of just happen, right? Oh, look, there's a cost of living crisis. How did that happen? We don't know, but we'll get through it, right? We'll get through it by borrowing more money, right? And reducing the value of the money that you have in your pocket and what your wages are worth, right? So standard of living, cost of living stuff, the economy as a whole, the immigration stuff, the housing stuff, what else have you got? Disability services, like all these small factors are elevated to be deciding factors, right? Which is, it's indicative of how people go about voting, right? They're kind of one issue voter, right? Instead of being able to see this as a whole, right? And education should absolutely be front and center in there, because education needs an overhaul in this country. Because kids should be able to leave, certainly sixth class. I believe kids should be able to leave sixth class and be able to explain how all of these issues are interlinked, and also be able to make value judgments on which issue creates other issues, right? So if something goes askew here, what are the derivative results of that, right? Kids should be able to converse about such a topic, or to even have an unnourished but in utero understanding, right? It's a developing understanding, maybe an intuitive understanding of how all of these things are linked, right? And which one it takes priority, right? Which is the biggest domino, right? And then certainly by junior cert, leaving cert, absolutely kids should be well informed of this stuff, right? And be able to see, right, if the government does this, that's going to lead to that, which will lead to this, which affects me directly this way. But people have no clue of this stuff, right? So you'll have political parties talking about the need for maintaining the immigration levels as they are, but sprucing up the system a bit to make it more efficacious, make it more workable, right? Which, if anything, all that is going to do is quicken and increase the levels of immigration into this country. But on the other hand, then they'll talk about the need to tackle this housing crisis, right? And they're not stupid people. These people are well aware, right? It's a cover. If I was a totally maleficent being, right, malevolent being, and I was evil to the core, and I cared nothing for the people that I was in power over, would I rather them recognize me as evil, or would I rather them paint me as stupid or just not really getting it? I would much rather them see me as stupid. It's easier to hide behind the sheen of stupidity, because people Irish people especially, we forgive that a lot more than just straight evil, right? Evil never reveals itself, right? It has to be pulled out from under the bed into the light, right? So you've all of these issues, and the education system is there to assure that when you have your 13 years of indoctrination, you haven't a clue where to start on any of these topics. You haven't a clue. And college then compounds that stupidity and adds in a few little release valves where you feel like, this is the way forward to address these issues. And they're all cul-de-sacs, right? The majority, they're all cul-de-sacs, I would say. Because fundamentally what we're dealing with here is the question of choice. The question of choice then splits off into one's self-esteem. So the belief you have in your ability to understand the world with your mind, to take in information and to process it and make a coherent narrative of it, which hopefully resembles reality, right? And one's value on their worth. Do I believe that I should have a choice? Do I believe that I'm worthy of having a say in what goes on in this country, even though it directly affects me? Do I believe I'm worthy of having a seat at the table, right? And also, do I accept then with that the level of responsibility that goes along with having that choice or asserting that choice, right? So the other stuff is all smokescreen stuff, right? Because if everyone was 10% more responsible in their thinking, in their decision making, and in the choices that they make, the government would shrink in tandem with that. So as people become more self-sufficient and more autodidactic, right? They're teaching themselves now. They're beginning to think for themselves. The more that increases, the more the government shrinks, because it's not needed, right? You have people that are responsible for things. I'm responsible for my neighbourhood, so are the neighbours. I'm responsible for bringing the neighbour's bins in if he's not there, or whatever, all that sort of stuff, right? If the fence is broke, if the wall breaks, we'll fix it, that kind of thing, right? If the road is shoddy, we'll fill it, you know? And the more people get like that, the less there's a need for government and these local councillors and stuff. There's just a less of a need for it, right? They don't have the power to play on it anymore because they've nothing to give you, because you give it to yourself, right? So fundamentally, voting is around that. So if you want less responsibility for yourself, for your community, for the people around you, for your country, for your county, right? Then you'll continue voting for the status quo, what's there already, because these people are rapacious. They're monstrous in their appetite for more and more and more control, more and more influence of your life. So they'll sell you some things, and what they're trying to buy off you is your responsibility. That's what they're buying off you, right? That is what they're trying to take from you, or not even take. That's what they're trying to convince you need to give them. Because the more responsibility you decline for your life and what goes on in your environment, the more they'll take from you. And the more responsibility they have for what goes on in your life, the more control they have over you and your life, and your wages and your family and your inheritance and your ancestors or your descendants, whatever, right? All that sort of stuff. So that's fundamentally what the choice is. So it's probably worthy of thinking of that. So do I want to continue giving over responsibility of my life, my decision making, and my perception of reality to the status quo? Would I like to give more of it away? Right? So if you want to give more of it away, I would suggest you vote for Sinn Féin, because they will take more of it from you. Right? If you're happy with what's going on, vote the status quo that's already in there. But if you're unhappy with that and you would like to take back some of your responsibility from these people, I would suggest you vote for something different. Does that mean it will be perfect and it'll be a clean sweep if you decide to do so? No. We're dealing with sophisticated espionage, essentially, right? Spy games. That's what you're dealing with. So you'll have people, independents, who left the party 20 years ago, but they backed that party on every single policy and every single decision. They're friends with the people in them parties, right? So are they any different? You could argue, on paper, yeah, in terms of the heading. I'm not Fianna Fáil, but I'm an independent, right? So how many of them are out there? Do we know all of them? If that was the case and they're being deceptive about it, would they tell you that? Look, lads, I know I'm independent, but I'm going to back Fine Gael or Sinn Féin on every single thing. They're not going to tell you that. You know, they want to appeal to your desire for something different, or the rebellious bit in you that wants to dismantle the status quo. So that's what they'll sell to you. But they're essentially buying the same thing from you, right? Because they don't, if you go back on their voting records, a lot of these people, they're hand in hand with the status quo, right? And then you've the new breakaway independent parties. How many of them are trustworthy? Can we know that? How do we know that? Do human beings have the ability to detect deception in people? Are some better at it than others? Is that an innate thing? Are you born with that? Can you enhance that? Can you develop that like a muscle? Can you work on that? Right? And these are all questions that we're walking through, right? And we're figuring out as we go along. Like, and there will be mistakes made. There will be losses. There will be moments of total despair, right? Because we're going to vote for things that we think are the answer to what we want. But it turns out they're not going to be, right? In some cases. In other cases, it will be not exactly, but it will be in line with what we were envisioning when we decided to vote for them. But there's only one way of finding that out, right? And essentially, it's up to each individual to ask themselves that question. Am I happy with the level of responsibility that other people have over my life, my finances, and my family and my future? That's what your decision should be made on. It shouldn't be a one-trick thing where it's like, do you think that there should be more disability services? Vote according to that. Don't do that. There will be people that do that, but not to tell people what to do. I would suggest that is a very myopic way of looking at things, right? It's very one-dimensional, and you're kind of missing a bigger picture there, because that is not the top of the deck in terms of how these things become problems, right? That's not top of the deck. It's certainly not. Look, it's up to everyone. It's up to each of us. But there's questions being posed. And ultimately, what the battle for here is for people's minds, right? It's for people's accountability, people's integrity, people's honour. That's what the war is about, right? It's not about like disability services or free childcare or more bus services. That stuff is all like, again, derivative of other issues, right? So if you're spending massive money on one or two issues up here, then of course the smaller issues just don't get funding, right? Whereas if you get rid of these big massive one or two issues up here, there's more money for other things, right? So those things kind of sort themselves out, right? So, yeah, again, fundamentally, are you happy with the level of responsibility that other people are taking and that you're giving them for your life, for your children's life and your children's future? Or is there something in you that would like to give it a bit more of a go? What could I do if I got to keep 50% more of the money that I'm giving towards tax? What would that look like? Or what would life look like if the tax that we all paid actually went to things that benefited us and we got to have a say in that, right? We got to have a say in that. That'd be great. We got to direct which policies were brought forward and motioned and implemented. If people got to have a direct say on that, wouldn't that be lovely? Right? Town by town, county by county. Wouldn't that be great? Instead of Dublin makes the decision and everyone else just has to accept it. I think that rotten system is dead now. It's dead. And the only way people who want to prop it up and keep it going can try and keep it going is by being deceitful and deceptive and not giving full information to people. Like you see Darragh O'Brien, apparently he's hesitant of releasing the homeless figures before the election. Why? Because it doesn't look good for him. Right? So he's hoping to get in based on you having limited information about the job that he's doing, right? Helen McEntee's at similar things. I would imagine they all are. There are so many things. The guy that stabbed the kids in Dublin, right? That looks like the can's been kicked down the road till after the election. But you can get arrested at a protest for recording a guard and you're in court the next day. See, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Right? So if you want to continue living in an Ireland and spend your life in a world where decisions are made by other people for you, on behalf of you, that don't make sense, then you know which way to go. But if you want a little bit of a change, not to fucking embody the Sinn Féin thing, right? But if you want to see a shift in the amount of responsibility and power that each individual in Ireland has, then you have to take a risk, right? So best of luck with everyone. And regardless of the outcome, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube again. There are many people in Ireland that are starting to think about these things really seriously, right? Or seriously enough to recognise that, hang on a second, that don't make sense. And what's going on over here? That don't make sense either. Why would you be doing this and then saying you want to do that as well? You can't do both, right? This sort of thing. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube again, right? The cat's out of the bag now. People are thinking, people are questioning, people are angry, people are not just blindly obeying anymore. People are snapping out of the coma that COVID and all of that sort of stuff put people into, right? And it's a great thing. And it's only moving in one direction, right? It doesn't mean there won't be detours and traps and attempted hijackings of where that direction is going, right? But it's going that way. And we'll work that out as we go as well, so long as we are dedicated to the idea of assuming more responsibility in our lives for ourselves instead of handing that over to other people who have been proven to not have your best interest at heart, right? They'll try and convince you that, all right, but the proof is in the pudding. Has your life been better over the last few years, or has it gotten worse? Has life been a little bit more difficult for you over the last few years? Simple as that.